My name is Natalie Pierce, and on the night everything changed, I pulled into the driveway of the house I built with my own hands, only to find my parents sitting outside in the freezing cold. I remember the sting of the wind on my cheeks as I stepped out of my car, the crunch of snow beneath my heels, and the way my mother's frail hands trembled as she tried to hide them inside the sleeves of her old wool coat. My father was beside her, stiff, lips pale from the bitter air. And, behind the door, the house that was supposed to be my sanctuary, I could hear laughter. Loud, careless laughter. Glasses clinking. Music spilling through the windows. My in-laws, celebrating as if they owned every inch of that home, while the two people who raised me were left shivering outside. My chest tightened, anger bubbling under the surface, but I forced my voice to stay steady as I bent down and touched my mother's frozen fingers. Mom, Dad, what are you doing out here? Why didn't anyone let you in? Her eyes darted away, heavy with shame. We didn't want to cause trouble. They said it wasn't the right time to disturb. I swallowed hard, tasting bitterness and guilt. I had fought so hard to build this life, to protect my parents from every slight and insult they had endured before. And yet, here they were, frozen outside my own home, while the very people who once belittled us reveled inside. That was the moment I knew something had to change. I wasn't always this composed. Years ago, when I first married Ethan, I believed love alone would protect me. I was wrong. From the start, his parents, Richard and Diane, made it clear I didn't belong. I still remember one Thanksgiving, my mom brought her famous apple pie, the one she baked every year since I was little. Diane barely glanced at it before sliding it to the far end of the table, untouched. My dad tried to make small talk about football with Richard, but Richard waved him off like a nuisance. I laughed nervously, clutching Ethan's hand under the table, hoping he'd speak up. But he stayed silent. I stayed silent too. And in that silence, a piece of me shrank. The insults grew sharper with time. My clothes weren't classy enough. My parents were too ordinary. Even when I decorated our first apartment, Diane sneered, "It looks like a college dorm, not a home." One night, after another argument, I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at my reflection, my mascara running. My hands shook as I pressed them against the sink, whispering, "You have to be stronger than this." It was my grandmother's words that came back to me, words she had repeated so often when I was little. "Natalie, one day your silence will cost you more than your voice. Own your place in the world before someone else does." That night, I decided. I couldn't control my in-laws, and I couldn't change Ethan's weakness. But I could build myself. Quietly, patiently, relentlessly. The very next morning, I applied for a certificate program in digital design at the community college. Nobody knew. Not Ethan, not my parents, not a single friend.
It was my secret lifeline.
I worked through long nights, the glow of my laptop my only company. My tears would fall onto the keyboard sometimes, but I kept going. Each assignment completed, each skill learned, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. The first time I got paid, just $200 for a freelance logo, I held that check in my hands like it was a treasure. Not because of the money, but because it was mine. Proof that I didn't have to beg for a place at anyone's table. That decision, to quietly fight for my own independence, was the seed of everything that came later. Those early days nearly broke me. I would wake up before sunrise, make Ethan's coffee, pack his lunch, and send him off to work. Then, while the house was quiet, I'd pull out my laptop and dive into design projects. Sometimes I'd pause, staring at my reflection in the darkened window above my desk. My hair messy, my eyes tired, a chipped nail tapping nervously on the keyboard. I wasn't the polished woman I longed to be, but I was becoming someone stronger. The beginning was rough. Clients doubted me. Some demanded endless revisions for pennies, some ghosted me after promising payment. There were nights I'd cry into a cold cup of coffee, wondering if I was delusional to think I could build anything of worth. But I refused to give up. I remember meeting Margaret Lewis, a seasoned business consultant I stumbled across at a local networking event I almost didn't attend. She was in her 50s, sharp eyes behind elegant glasses, her posture radiating authority. Somehow, she saw through my nervous smile. "You've got fire, Natalie," she said after reviewing my portfolio. "But you're hiding it. Stop apologizing for taking up space." Her words stuck. Margaret became my quiet mentor, guiding me on contracts, pricing, and most importantly, self-worth. With her advice, I stopped underselling myself. Slowly, the projects grew bigger. A boutique fashion store hired me for a full branding package. A small tech startup brought me on to design their entire online presence. Every time I deposited money into my secret account, I felt closer to freedom. But I didn't flaunt it. Online, I posted modest updates. A coffee cup here, a sunset there. Nothing that hinted at the empire I was quietly building. Even Ethan believed I was just dabbling to keep myself busy. What he didn't know was that I was saving. Every dollar mattered. I tracked expenses in a hidden spreadsheet, calculating how long before I could stand on my own 2 feet. And then one moment stands out above all. The day I signed the lease on my first office. It wasn't fancy, just a single room with creaky floors and peeling paint. But I walked inside, breathed in the scent of fresh paint I had splurged on, and whispered to myself, "This is mine." From that small office, my company grew. I hired 2 part-time assistants, then 3. Within 3 years, we had clients across the country. By year 5, I bought the house Ethan and I lived in, paid for in full under my name. I never bragged. I never gloated. I simply kept moving forward, determined that no one, especially not my in-laws, would ever have the power to belittle my parents or myself again. And yet, despite all that success, I still found myself that winter night, staring at my shivering parents on my doorstep while laughter echoed from inside. The time for silence was finally over. I took a deep breath, letting the icy air fill my lungs before stepping toward the front door. My parents huddled together, their eyes wide, as if they couldn't believe I was here, alive, furious, and finally ready to act. "Mom."
Dad inside.
"Now," I said, my voice calm but firm. My hands brushed snow off my mother's coat as I guided them through the threshold. The warmth of the house hit them like a wave, and for a brief moment, I saw relief flicker across their tired faces. And then there they were, Ethan's parents, Richard and Diane, laughing, glasses in hand, unaware that I had arrived. Diane's lipstick smudged slightly as she leaned toward the buffet, commenting loudly on the desserts. Richard's gaze swept the room, expecting the usual submissive daughter-in-law posture. But there I stood, coat still dripping with snow, chest rising and falling with controlled fury. The room went quiet, not immediately, but the silence started as a faint pause, a hesitation in their laughter. I removed my gloves slowly, letting my actions draw attention. I looked around at the walls, the art I had chosen, the custom shelves built with my own hands, the pristine oak floors that gleamed under the chandelier. "This is beautiful," Diane said, her voice wavering. I smiled, a small, deliberate smile. "Thank you. But it's not just beautiful, it's mine. All of it." Richard's jaw tightened. What do you mean?" I let the words hang in the air. "The house. The design. The company that pays for this home. All of it. My name, my accounts, my work. Not Ethan's. Not anyone else's. Mine." They looked around, disbelief written on their faces. Diane's hand went to her mouth, and Richard's eyes darted toward Ethan, who now looked as uncomfortable as I had felt all those years. I took another step forward, gently seating my parents in the chairs they had avoided all evening. "And these two," I said, my voice softening, "deserve warmth, respect, and a place at this table. Not frozen on my doorstep." Tears welled in my mother's eyes. My father nodded, silent but proud. Ethan finally spoke, his voice small. "Natalie." I didn't realize. I cut him off gently. "You didn't. And that's why this matters. I built this, not to punish anyone, but to make sure this never happens again. No one ever treats my parents like outsiders in my home. Not tonight, not ever." The room was still. My in-laws could no longer hide behind authority or entitlement. Their control had evaporated in the warmth of my presence, my voice, my success. And for the first time, I could see the fear of accountability, the flicker of shame, and even, reluctantly, respect. I walked to the buffet, poured a glass of water, and handed it to my mother. "Here," I said. "You're safe now."
And I mean that.
Diane swallowed hard. Richard looked as if he had lost something essential, the power he thought was his by birthright. I smiled once more, a mixture of triumph and compassion. The rules have changed. Welcome to my home. And in that moment, the snow and silence of the night seemed to vanish, replaced by the warmth of justice and the first taste of a reckoning long overdue. I stood in the center of my living room, letting the silence stretch just long enough for everyone to feel it. The warmth from the fireplace contrasted sharply with the chill that had gripped my parents outside moments ago. But now I had the power, and with it, responsibility. I turned to my in-laws first. "Let's be clear," I began, my voice firm but calm. "This home is mine. My parents will never be left outside again. Ever. That is non-negotiable." Richard opened his mouth, probably to argue, but I raised a hand. "No, you listen. Diane, Richard, there are conditions. If you want to be a part of this family from now on, these are the rules." Diane's lips trembled, and Richard's face went pale. "First," I continued, "respect. Every single person in this house deserves it, starting with my parents. That means no insults, no belittling comments, no condescending laughter. Ever." I paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "Second," I said, my gaze sweeping the room, "you cannot assume ownership over anything here. Decisions about the house, my business, or any celebrations are mine to make. You may participate, but you will not control, manipulate, or dictate." Their protests began, but I silenced them with a quiet shake of my head. "There's more." "Third," I said, softer now but no less firm, "you must face your own behaviors. Toxic habits that hurt people, you will address them. Therapy, reflection, personal growth. You will do this not because I demand it, but because it is the only way for you to truly be part of this family without harming anyone else." Richard's jaw clenched. Diane's hands trembled in her lap. I could see the realization that nothing, no entitlement, no wealth, no tradition, would protect them from accountability. I turned to my parents, my heart full. "You two are safe here. You are honored, respected, and loved. You will always have a seat at my table, warm meals, and a home where your voices matter." My mother's eyes filled with tears. My father's chest puffed slightly with pride. "And finally," I said, my voice steady and resolute, "any celebrations, holidays, or gatherings will never, ever repeat the past. If you want to be here, it will be on the terms of love, respect, and equality. No one gets a pass for cruelty." I paused. "You may think this is harsh, but what you did, leaving my parents out in the cold, it has consequences. And accountability is the only path forward." A long silence filled the room. Then, surprisingly, Diane spoke first. Her voice was shaky, almost a whisper. "We understand. We will try. We will change." Richard nodded, still pale but compliant.
Yes.
We see now." I nodded once, satisfied but watchful.
Good.
"Then let's start anew. And know this, my parents will never again be treated like outsiders. This is my home, and I will protect them no matter what." The shift was complete. The balance of power had changed. The fear of past injustices hung in the air, and for the first time, everyone understood that respect here was earned, not assumed. And for me, the quiet satisfaction was profound. I wasn't just protecting a house. I was reclaiming dignity, forging boundaries, and building a family where love didn't come with strings or cruelty. Weeks passed, and the house slowly transformed from a battlefield into a home again. My parents, once stiff and hesitant, now moved through the rooms with ease. Mom hummed while cooking, Dad offered his opinions without fear of dismissal. I watched them, my heart swelling with a mix of relief and pride. Richard and Diane didn't become perfect overnight, but the rules I set created space for reflection. Diane signed up for counseling, quietly admitting to herself the ways she had hurt others. Richard started volunteering at a community center, realizing the control he had wielded over his own family mirrored the rigidity he imposed elsewhere. Their small steps, hesitant but genuine, reminded me that growth was possible, even for those who had once caused so much pain. Ethan, finally awake to what had been happening all these years, stood by my side differently. He wasn't just a husband now, he was a partner. He saw the work, the grit, the patience, and the courage that had shaped this life, and he learned to respect it. And me? I allowed myself moments to reflect. The tears, the late nights, the relentless pursuit of independence, they all mattered. Every struggle had been a brick in the foundation of who I had become. I thought back to my grandmother's advice. One day your silence will cost you more than your words. Own your place. I smiled softly. That wisdom had been my compass. The voice that had once whispered caution in my ears had guided me to strength, dignity, and a life I could be proud of. On a quiet evening, I found myself standing by the window, the same view that had once shown my parents shivering in the snow. Now, I saw them laughing at the dinner table, safe, warm, and cherished. My reflection merged with theirs in the glass, and I realized that in protecting them, I had protected myself too. I whispered to no one but the wind outside, a final statement that carried every ounce of resilience and grace I had gathered over the years. I found my parents frozen outside, but that night, I thawed every chain that ever tried to bind us, and nothing will ever be able to freeze our love again. The house felt alive, not because of the walls or the furniture, but because of the respect, courage, and care that now defined it. And in that warmth, I knew the story had shifted forever.